Welcome to the Evolve Podcast, a podcast about disrupting your life to spark new evolution. Evolve your body, evolve your mind, evolve your soul, and evolve your tribe. And now it's time to disrupt.
Nice. That's awesome.
Well, the gloves on the wall look pretty cool. Well, Dylan, you'll appreciate this though. So where I've got my helmets hanging up in my garage, we took down the fence around our backyard, and we had all of this old wood. I mean, this stuff, I don't know how long it's been up for, but it's like old and weathered, and it's got the holes in it, and just it's super cool looking wood. I'm like, well, shit, I'm not going to get rid of this. So I repurposed it into this little alcove where I have all of my helmets and I built a little stand for my gloves. So like when I pull my motorcycle in, it's just boom, my helmets are right there. But seriously, man, my helmets hanging up are not even close to what those stands are.
Yeah.
How did you get the idea to do that? So you had these bicycle chains and then you welded them together.
Yeah. So it was when I was at Rocky Mountain ATV here in Payson, and I was in building maintenance, and we'd have the whole conveyor system. There was a set of chains that ran on some gears and stuff. And so I used those first, but then I was building so many of them and then ran out of those chains. And then I used dirt bike chains. And so, yeah, so they're pretty hefty, thick chains. And then I just welded each link together, and then made it loop, and I tested it on a helmet, and it worked out perfect. So
it's like the coolest looking thing. I've never seen a helmet rack like that for motorcycle helmets. I mean, I've seen them where you can hang your helmets up and display them, and they look really cool. But that is super cool, man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there was a time when I was super broke and just had to be creative to make everybody's Christmas gifts, and so that was one for my friends that I had to make. So
really, so you came up with this idea. Did you make them for yourself first, or did you make them for your friends for Christmas? And
yeah, I actually made them for my friends first, so they were the test dummies. And so again, just trying to be scrappy, so it was free chain, and then there was these awesome pallets that we had down to work that I just screwed onto these pallets. And then so my buddy and his wife, they both had Harleys, and so I made them first, and then I made these for myself, and then Christina too. So
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Just think, if you had money, you would have bought somebody probably a really nice uncreative gift.
Yeah.
If they were broke, you had to go in your imagination and come up with something phenomenal.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's a lesson in here somewhere.
Yeah.
That's kind of how life is, right? I mean, when you don't have resources, you got to be creative.
Right.
Money's a resource we don't always have, so we got to be creative about what we put together. Right. And we got to look around. It's not as easy to just pull as pulling out cash and going and buying something.
All the great foods of the world started out as peasant food.
Right.
That is true. Yeah. If you look back in history, that there is no doubt about it. Yep. I listened to that history of food, or I can't remember the exact name of it, on Audible. It's one of my favorite. It was like an 18 or 19 hour audio course, and fascinating to just go through and learn about how food progressed and what people ate over the centuries. And the majority of it was fascinating that people ate according to what the religious construct of the day was. So if the priest wanted lamb, then lamb was what you were supposed to sacrifice to God. And so then the priest would eat that, you'd eat everything else. And this just repeated itself throughout history.
Yeah, and because they didn't have really cool methods for preserving it, it was all seasonal.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Which makes a big difference too.
Yeah.
Well, Miles, you're jumping into a conversation, that Dylan and I have. This is pretty typical conversation. It just bounces from one thing to the next. Oftentimes, it revolves around something having to do with either motorcycles or cars. But we kind of pop all over the place, just like you and I do. But it's the only difference between when you and I talk and when Dylan and I talk is every once in a while I get a little sleepy, not because Dylan's a boring guy, but because I'm sitting in his chair. We got my barber here tonight, and I know what you're thinking, Miles. You looked at me and you said, "Steve, you look really good tonight," and you're right, I do, because I saw Dylan a couple of days ago, and we've been talking about this episode for quite some time. Because we share something that is, I think, pretty cool. We share a couple of things that are pretty cool. Number one, we both found out later in life that we have ADHD. And so I think that's pretty cool. We're going to talk about what that's like to find that out later in life.
Well, let me find out. Wait, before you go on, this is not going to be one of those podcasts where at the end of the podcast, I've joined your club because you've talked about so much information about ADHD, and I'm going to sit here and go, shit, I think I have that too.
I got the book right here, buddy. No, but I think so. We found out that we have it, right? And then I think the other cool thing is what I said earlier, that we found out later in life. You see, ADHD can get diagnosed really at any stage of life. Many people find out they have it when they're younger, and they get on medication, and the medication can be extremely helpful for them. But there's different strategies depending on the stage of life that you get diagnosed with ADHD. Now, I'm 46 years old. I'll be 47 in this upcoming May. And I got diagnosed probably 6 or 7 months ago, which we'll get into talking a little bit about my story. We'll get into talking about Dylan's story. And man, I've been going to see Dylan for a few years now to get my hair cut. And one day, I don't even remember how it came up. I don't know, Dylan, if you mentioned it or if I mentioned it, but somehow we got into the fact that we both figured out later in life that we've got ADHD. Now, you're younger than I am. How old are you?
I'll be 31 in December. So,
and you found out you got diagnosed at what age?
30. So I just
30.
When you figured it out, I figured it out. It was like we were on the same wavelength for that, for sure.
Yeah, it was pretty serendipitous. And so we'll jump into our stories here. But with that, folks, we want to welcome you to another episode of the Evolve podcast. Joining me in Oberlin, Ohio, looking suave with his great looking haircut, since we're on the topic of hair, the most interesting man that I know is W. Miles Riley. Welcome, Miles.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here. It's been a minute.
It's fun to be back on together.
Yeah. I'm tired of walking around the house talking to my plants and my rabbit and talking to my books. I'm like, where's Steve? I had talked to Steve and a guest.
It's been a couple of weeks at least. Yeah.
So
well, and in the mountains of Utah, I am Steve Cutler. Today's guest, as I mentioned before, is my barber, Dylan Clark. A great barber, probably the best barber I've had, and not just for the haircuts, but for the conversation. Dylan, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so grew up in Utah, down here in Payson, Utah, and mom is a cosmetologist. My sister's a cosmetologist, so it kind of runs in the family. I didn't go into barbering right away. After I graduated high school, I went to UVU for one semester, and we can get into the whole, looking back, it makes me realize how much my ADD or ADHD had affected me. But that's one semester of college just was not my thing. I just struggled, just couldn't pay attention, just any of that stuff. And so ended up going to work. I went to work at Rocky Mountain ATV. Originally started out baling cardboard for 8 hours a day, and then worked my way up.
What is baling cardboard? I've never heard that before. What does that mean? Is that like baling hay?
Yeah, essentially. So you're just putting cardboard into this compactor that eventually fills up, and you have to put wire, like bale wire around it, and then
Okay.
throw it on a pallet, and then someone comes and recycles it. So it was, oh my gosh. Yeah, that was some mind numbing. Like it's kind of funny because you're so in the zone, and I just had music going all the time, and just you didn't talk to anybody. So for me, it was really hard because I'm a talker. I want to talk to everybody.
Yeah, you got
And
to have the conversations.
yeah, so I was missing out on that. So there was many times I got in trouble for stopping what I'm doing and going and talking. It's a little time theft there, I'm sure. But yeah, so eventually worked my way into building maintenance, and quickly realized, well, kind of quickly realized I wasn't going to go anywhere. Company's really young. All the upper management was in their 40s. So for me, I just knew I had to do something. And then my friend and I were out riding our Harleys, and we were going to get some oil over at Legends Motorcycle in Springville, which is a really cool motorcycle museum. And inside that museum it's now changed quite a bit, but was a barbershop. And my buddy had hair to the middle of his back, and he's like, I'm going to cut my hair off today. Let's go talk to this barber. So while he was getting his hair cut, he had said to the barber, like, hey, my friend is interested in cutting hair. How did you get started? And then the shop owner, Steven Roccazella, just told me everything, where he went to school, told me his story. He's got a great story. But yeah, he told me about the barber school in Midvale. And that night I went home and just applied, and it's an automatic acceptance. They just want your money. So
not a lot of hoops you got to jump through to get into the barber school.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
They just need your money. So did that and graduated in early 2017. And then, yeah, I've been cutting hair ever since. So
yeah, you got into it.
I have a 14-year-old kid here. There's a 14-year-old kid here in Oberlin. He just started cutting hair, and I let him guinea pig on me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I posted it one day, and then another guy who's a chef wanted him to cut his hair, and then for my son, who's also 14, for his high school dance, the kid cut my son's hair. So now people know he's cutting hair, and he gives you steep discounts.
Yes,
because he's practicing.
Right. Yeah.
Was that Chef Barnard that was on our show? Okay.
Yeah, I was Chef.
Yeah. So if our listeners haven't listened, you got to go listen to our episode with Chef. Well, so Dylan, you got into barbering. You got you work at a place here in Sandy, Utah called Wild Boar Barbers. You guys are full, hard to get into because you guys are doing such a great job. But I want to take it to that to the fateful day, right? We'll call it that, the fateful day when you and I were sitting and talking. And I think that the day that we started, like, like when you realize another person is kind of like you and you just are pointing at each other. It's like that old Spider-Man cartoon. You're just, all the Spider-Men are pointing at each other. And we're like, wait a minute, you know this? Oh, but that's me. And so we ended up, I think everybody had left the shop. The haircut was done. And I don't know how long we talked for, an hour and a half afterwards. We just kept going and going. Right. Because not only did we share this, connection with this idea that we have ADHD, but the fact that we're learning this later in life. I mean, it made so much sense. So talk about what led you to the point where you figured out, hey, there's something going on here and I probably should get tested, or, what led you to that point?
Right. So when I can't remember exactly, I kind of feel like it was you, Steve, when you were in my chair and talking about ADHD. I was like, huh. And then you're like, well, have you read this book, ADHD 2.0? And I was like, oh, no, I haven't. And then you were like, oh, listen to it, read it, whatever you got to do, digest it. And but in that conversation, I was like, huh, that makes sense. Oh, I do that. Oh, yeah, I do that. And I can't remember if I had talked. So I started going to a therapist January or February of this year. And then talking with her, just, told her kind of my life story and stuff. And then all the trials and everything that I've gone through. And then now time had passed. And then I said, the next session, I was like, do I have ADHD? Do you think I have ADHD? And she's like, yes, you do, but let's do a actual test.
There's no pause. It's just, no pause. Yes, you do.
Yes, you do. And so it was after our conversation that I officially asked about it and tried to get a test. And so her and I did the test and checked basically all the boxes except for a couple. And she's like, yeah, you have ADHD. You can use medication if you want. You don't have to. And so right now I've chosen not to, just because I kind of feel like I've gotten through this world and this life for the last 30 years without it. And let's try and hack it a little bit, and see what comes of it. So.
Yeah, so it's that's cool to hear. I forgot about that. That's what had sparked it. So I remember that conversation because I don't know how many months and months ago it was that my daughter came to my wife and I and said, "Hey, I'm struggling with a few things. Do you mind paying for me to go see a counselor?" And we said, yeah, whatever you need, whatever it takes. We're big believers in physical and mental health, right? There shouldn't be no stigma on any of those things. If you get cancer, there's not a stigma around it. Mental health shouldn't have a stigma either, right? So anyway, she came back and said, hey, the counselor diagnosed me with ADHD. And my initial response was, there's no way. Yeah, I mean, you sit and you read a book for hours on end. You can focus. There's just no way. And she goes, no, that's actually part of it. So I said, all right, you got to give me more, like, help me understand this. Cause I'm blown away. When I thought ADHD, all I could think of was like that hyperactive kid, the one that you don't give sugar to, you just bouncing off the wall, never give him caffeine because he can't sit down and sit still. So my daughter recommended a book. And I can't remember the name of it. I started to read through it and it was a pretty interesting book. And then about a week or two later, she said, no, there's actually a better one that my counselor just told me about called ADHD 2.0. So I downloaded that on Audible, started listening to it on the way to work. And I get about a quarter of the way in and my mind is just blown. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my daughter to a T. It's, yes, she can focus for a really, really long period of time, and then she can't, and she won't remember things. And then I get further into it. About halfway through, I think, wait a minute, this is genetic? Well, where did this come from? And then something starts to wake up inside of me about, 3/4 of the way through the book. I'm thinking, I wonder if I have this, because this sounds a lot like my childhood. This sounds a lot like the way I was in school. I got almost finished with the book and I thought to myself, I got to go get tested. I would bet my life that I have this. So I scheduled an appointment. And I think after, as I was about halfway through the book and I was explaining it to you, that's where we started to connect. So we probably went and got diagnosed right about the same time. You at age 30, me at age 45, 46. And what a crazy path, the way that it's come up. So, I wanted to have the conversation today, really, and anybody that's listening to this, so that you understand we are just three guys having a conversation. We are not experts in this. We are not telling you what to do. This is just our experience. If you feel like you have ADHD, you're not sure, go get tested, have a professional work with you. And as Dylan mentioned, with his path, that he's not doing medication, neither am I. That doesn't mean we're opposed to it. I think that from what I've studied, what I've read, and what I've seen, medication can be extremely beneficial. In fact, if you have not listened to Andrew Huberman's podcast on focus and ADHD, I would highly recommend. when you're finished with this episode, that you go listen to the Huberman Lab podcast on ADHD. I think he does one of the best jobs that I've heard of explaining what happens in what we call a non-neurotypical brain, right? We are neurodivergent brains. So Dylan, let's jump into, once you got the diagnosis of ADHD, what was your initial reaction?
Just everything clicked, everything made sense. I just growing up, it's always been a struggle. I was like your daughter. I could sit still. I very much followed the rules. I didn't break the rules. So if a teacher said, sit down, be quiet, I could, but my mind wasn't there. My mind doesn't stop. It goes a mile a minute. Like, it's funny because I follow, now knowing with ADHD what it is and how it affects me, following certain Instagram pages. There was one where it was a scenario of a woman walking through her kitchen and just different things were going on in her head and different voices and all this. And I show it to my fiance, Christina, and I'm like, this is what my brain does all the time. Like, it does not stop. It will not stop. And so, and she's like, oh my gosh, like, I'm sorry, like, you have to deal with that. And it's funny now because she, after I was diagnosed with ADHD and we were talked about it more and more, she's like, do I have ADHD? And to find out she has ADHD.
It's contagious.
Yeah. So it is funny because Miles will have it after this, but
yeah.
So for me, I'm just trying now to learn what to do, how to handle it, without medication. But like you say, I am open to medication. It's not that I'm against it. I kind of, I'm choosing not to. But
wait a minute, before you go, can we back up a little bit for somebody who, because Steve said something both of you guys have said something that's antithetical to me.
Uh-huh.
And the one with Steve was your daughter can read books and be focused. And then when you said, what was it, that you could sit? So I think a lot of our listeners, I know I am still now lost as to what exactly is ADHD.
Yeah,
because
that's
I've
a great
always
question.
thought it was what Steve said, that hyperactive kid can't sit still, is always fidgeting and moving.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm hearing about a young woman who can sit there and read a book, and you can have a teacher tell you to sit down and be still, and you can actually do that. So now I'm lost as to what ADHD is, and I don't want our listeners to just miss this. So could you guys back up and really take us, what is it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and that was one of the things that really, maybe. So one of the things that I learned when I started to study this is that ADHD is a condition of the brain. It's essentially the way that your brain is wired, right? So there is a neurotypical brain, and then there are neurodivergent brains, which I think is really fascinating when you think about those two words. Maybe the neurodivergents are the typical ones, and maybe the other ones aren't, but we'll get into that another time. So with ADHD, and there are different symptoms, but with ADHD, you have the ability to focus, and you can focus more than what anybody else can focus until you can't. And so ADHD oftentimes is this condition of the brain of two diametrically opposed conditions. One of the things that I think one of the authors, Hallowell and Ratty, that wrote ADHD 2.0, talked about is that think about a normal brain, a non-neurodivergent brain, right? A neurotypical brain. And that brain has a shift or a switch in it, right? So your ability to focus, when your ability to focus goes up, then your creativity or your openness to the world tends to go down. and then vice versa. So when you're more open and you kind of go into this, what they call default mode, then your focus goes down. And so it's this regulator switch. So one goes up and then the other one goes down. The problem that people with the neurodivergent ADHD brain have is the switch doesn't work very well. So the way that the authors talk about it is, and I've actually heard others say the same thing, imagine driving a Porsche with bicycle brakes, right? So you've got this massive powerhouse of an engine, but your brakes don't work very well. And so you might run into this situation where the focus is high and the creativity is high as well. This is one of the reasons why some people with ADHD, and in fact, probably many people with ADHD, struggle with more consistent negative thoughts. Because when something bad happens in your life, you might be able to put it into perspective quickly if you have a neurotypical brain. But those with neurodivergent brains, they focus, like laser focus on whatever that problem is. And at the same time, because the regulator switch isn't working, your creativity is going crazy. And so you can go from 0 to 100 in no time flat, which means you can go from feeling good to holy shit, the world is going to end just like that. And like Dylan's fiance said, I'm sorry that that's how your brain works. It really is. It's something it's like phenomenally crazy when you think about that the brain works like that. And I've seen that happen with myself. That's part of what I've had to develop over the years, is that when something negative happens, I have to learn how to strengthen the brakes to say, whoa, wait a minute. We shouldn't be in focus mode and massively creative mode at the same time, because those things don't work well. So, there's this huge dichotomy with all ADHD brains. Dylan, fill in the blanks for us. What am I missing here?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for example, a prime example is yesterday. So it's a tale of 2 days. So yesterday is day off. Today is a day off for me. And yesterday had intention. I had a plan. I'm going to clean the garage and I'm going to organize my trailer. Like, I had tasks because we're leaving for a vacation this Saturday. And so I had things that I needed to get done. Well, then yesterday, starting to clean out the garage, Christina grabs a jacket that's hanging on the wall. She grabs a jacket, a mouse jumps off the jacket onto her, falls to the ground, runs away. The whole day is now shifted. I didn't clean the garage. I didn't get anything I needed to get done. It was all shifted to this mouse. So my focus transitioned into this. And then today, so I took everything out of my garage, risked it all, left everything outside last night, set traps out just to try and catch this mouse. Go out to the garage
and it was raining and snowing last night.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it was a choice. It was a decision that was made. So, and then go out today, the mouse is caught. Perfect. So then today went into, all right, we're going to clean the garage so I can focus, I can hyper focus. And I knocked out the garage task. But then my sister calls me and says, hey, can you come help us move our fridge? That completely distracts me. That pulls me away from the garage. I was almost done, had a few things to do left. Go help my sister come back. I come back and I'm working. I come into the office and I start looking at stuff on the computer. Next thing I know, 3 hours pass by. And I am not anywhere near being done with the garage. Like, I just needed, if I would have came back and would have focused in on the garage, it would have been great. But then came back in, started working on the computer, and then I lost track of time, had to hurry and get ready for this. And so the garage is put away, everything's done, but you can just get diverted so quickly with an ADHD brain and like not even think about the other tasks that you had to do. And yeah, you're gonna
So
say
what would the long version definition of this be? And Steve, you have the book, because I'm still like a little puzzled
right.
as to
Well,
what this is. Like what would be the long, if I'm almost certain that most of us out here in the world, we have this kind of shortcut to what we think it is.
Right.
So what is the technical long version definition of this? Because I am
well, that's
perplexed.
yeah. So that's the interesting thing is that there are, I believe, one researcher has identified. Most agree, I believe, that there's 7 different types of ADHD. Now, there's one researcher out there that says, no, there's actually, I can't remember what he says, close to like 20 different segments or different types of ADHD. Now, the authors of ADHD 2.0 talk about how many people in our day and age, because of the digital distraction that we have going on, have some form of ADHD. They call it VAST, and I can't remember off the top of my head what that stands for. But anyway, it's essentially just it has nothing to do with the way your brain is wired, but it has more to do with the habits that you have. So if you're in a habit of touching your phone, picking it up and looking at it, if your habit of every time it buzzes, you gotta pay attention to that, or you turn this way or that way with every ding, because we're always on. So that's pretty typical of our day and age. That most people may be listening to this podcast and they say, well, I get distracted easy. Well, most people in today's day and age do, right?
Right.
But those with ADHD, their brains are actually wired different. So you live on this scale, this dichotomistic scale, where one day you may be completely focused. The next day you've got complete monkey mind, where it's bouncing all over the place. This morning, for instance, I woke up trying to get into my morning meditative routine. I'm reading. It feels okay, but it's not. There's no flow there. So I think, okay, today's a monkey mind day. And I go to the gym and I start going through my workout program, and I lose track of my reps. And we're talking like I'm doing sets of 6 to 8 reps. And I don't even know what rep I'm at. I'm like, well, it hurts. So, all right. I just keep going until I can't do another rep. So I take whatever set that I'm doing to failure if I lose track of my reps. And then there's other days where I will go in and it's laser focused. And there are things you can do when you have ADHD to train the focus. And there are things that you can do to funnel some of the monkey mind energy, but some of it you just simply can't control. It just is what it is. And so, I've been studying a lot lately about Buddhist philosophy and Taoist philosophy.
I was getting ready to bring that up.
Because I believe that there's a certain level of acceptance that has to happen, and a certain level of flow. When you read the Tao Te Ching, which I've read many, many times, but this time around it's hitting me different, because the concept of Wu Wei, which is essentially just going with the flow, the work with no work concept. I've tried to employ that in my life, understanding that, there are going to be monkey mind days and there are going to be hyper focused days. And rather than judging them, just go with what the brain does. Sometimes you're going to be driving the boat and sometimes you're going to be surfing on the wave.
Tell me what you guys think of this, because Steve knows that I love playing with quantum physics. I love reading about that stuff. And what they talk about is light can be a particle and it can be a wave. If you're seeing it directly, it's a particle. If you're looking for it, it's a wave. And when you what they call it, collapsing the wave to see the particle. And I was reading one book, and I think it was called, as a matter of fact, it's here, the Dancing Wooly Masters. And basically what they've said is monkey mind is your quantum self. Monkey mind is your mind all over the place, looking for possibility, understanding possibilities, that everything so much exists. And it's up to your conscious mind to collapse the wave into something that you then choose to work with. But that when you're not choosing, when you haven't made a decision to work with anything, then you're into your quantum self. You have all these ideas. It's almost as if, I don't know if you guys, have you ever read James Joyce's Ulysses? Because
No, I need to.
He,
We've talked
he,
about
he,
that so many times. I need to do that.
Yeah, he's the probably the father of the interior unconscious monologue, or the interior monologue that just seems to go and create dialogues, monologues, and then all of a sudden something will happen in your life that you have to focus on. You focus on it, and when you're not focusing on it, you're back into this world of all kinds of things. And so quantum physicists that also play as spiritualists think that that's our quantum function, to be in this monkey mind of ideas and all types of things until we decide to collapse it into one particular idea.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and I don't know if it fits that that model or not. I mean, I definitely think that at least from what I've read, and I think Dylan's a good example of this. A lot of people with ADHD, they have a tendency to be very, very insightful. They have a tendency to be people who see things that others don't see, who feel things that others don't feel. You know, wow. I in this ADHD 2.0, I wanted to read this. The authors talk about these paradoxical tendencies. Okay, so I'm just going to read a few of them. So they say that there's unexplained underachievement. So this could be, hey, if there's some of these things, I may be a person that has ADHD. Again, you should get tested. A wandering mind is another one. Trouble organizing and planning. A high degree of creativity and imagination, trouble with time management, and a tendency to procrastinate. And that one's fascinating to me because one of the things that I learned is that people with ADHD have a very, very low tolerance. You know, that saying, people don't suffer fools. Well, people with ADHD have a very, very low tolerance for things that they're not interested in. If there's no interest level, you just you'll leave that conversation, and you may mentally leave it before you physically leave it, but you will be compelled to get up and just walk away. Next is strong will, stubbornness, and refusal of help, which is a fascinating one for me too. The refusal of help. I found that many times in my life. Generosity, restlessness, unique and active sense of humor. Trouble sharing and playing with others early on, but at the same time, a desire to make friends. Exquisite sensitivity to criticism and rejection. So again, this goes back to that regulator switch not working. Impulsiveness and impatience. And then finally, an itch to change the conditions of life. There's others in the book. So if you want to read a great book on it, or you're curious, somebody that you think might have ADHD 2.0 by Hallowell and Ratty is a good one. Dylan, what are your thoughts? I mean, this monkey mind concept that Miles is talking about, tapping into something that might be a little bit more cosmic.
Yeah. So as you were reading those, one of the things, it's not that I wasn't interested, Miles. I don't want to be rude, but you start.
But you have ADHD, so you have an excuse not to be interested. So it's fine.
I guess I try to not be rude, but it's just my mind just drifts off, as people are talking and speaking. And so yeah, I like the idea of the go with the flow and that sort of thing. But there are times that it is crippling to have ADHD. It stunts your day. It stops everything, as Steve was talking about his reps, like forgetting his reps, like that's literally every time I work out. I do not I will be working out, lifting weights, and I will not remember where I'm at, like what I'm doing, what set I'm on. I have to be in the gym and type it into my phone or write it down, or I've been able to find certain programs that is timed and I go along with the time. So But yeah, so as far as, like if it's, I guess, it's kind of what I was hearing is it's just a natural thing. Is it just kind of ebbs and flows in some people, and some people are just, their brains are just wired differently, is kind of the overall like understanding that I have of all of this.
Yeah, and
Right,
it's
because
interesting that we talk about it as a disorder, and that's the one piece. So, they talk about attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and one of the things that I've read from multiple authors is they say we probably need to reframe that, because it started as ADD, then it went to ADHD, and they said that's probably not even the best definition of it, because you could look at it as a disorder, but there are many things about it that are superpowers, because you have the ability with this monkey mind to shift from one thing to the next very quickly. In fact, people with ADHD can go from one thought to the next in just a millisecond, whereas and they're very adaptable. The other superpower is you do have the ability at times to focus and get things done for a really, really long period of time. You have this mental endurance that a lot of people will look at and just say, wow, how did you do that? So, this is a conversation my daughter and I've had. I said, if you look at it as a disorder, it can be, if it disables you from doing things that allow you to function in life. But it's also a superpower if you lean into it like that. Miles, you had a question.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting that in reading, again, going back to the Buddhist literature, and I read tons of Buddhist literature, and they've actually used words like monkey mind, and Buddhism has been around for 5,000 years. So are we kind of intimating that for 5,000 years the Buddhists have been dealing with ADHD?
Oh, I'm sure it's been around for a long time. Yeah.
But it's such a general, when they're talking about the manipulation of the mind, they're always talking about that. So are we talking about, let's think 5,000 years ago, where there were probably, I'm going to limit and say this, many different distractions, or distractions relative to the time period. Yeah. But Buddhism has been talking about this monkey mind, this controlling of the mind to have the best life. So are we saying that we're just realizing that this monkey mind is ADHD, or is it been around so long it's a natural condition of human beings?
I think what we're saying is that we are the most elevated human beings that are out there now.
So that's like that book, The Natural Superiority of the Left-Hander, that I swear by.
Yes. Well, I think so everyone that has ADHD deals with it in a different way, because the symptoms are different for each person, right? There's a lot of things from a biochemical, a lot of things from just a physical makeup, a lot of things from a habitual, a lot of things from a historical context that create challenges for people. I think about the one that they talked about in there, that people with ADHD, they tend to want to do a lot of things on their own, and they have a hard time asking for help. That was a really hard thing for me for a lot of years. And I think that stems from needing to figure things out so that it makes sense to me, because I would sit in school, as Dylan referenced, I was the same way. There were times where I'm sitting there listening to what the teacher's saying, looking around at everybody else, and it seemed like everybody got it. And I would just think to myself, what the hell is going on? I don't understand. Like, how do they get what she's saying? And nothing is connecting, right? Wow. And so I had to dig in, and I had to learn how I learned. And a lot of that had to be kinesthetic. A lot of it had to be visual. I had to draw pictures out. Yeah. I had to take a concept and fully deconstruct it. I remember in business, trying to figure out how to analyze a profit and loss statement. It took me 2 months to just even get the basic concepts. And then through repetition and writing it out and doing it over and over and over again, I finally got it. But man, that was a huge challenge. And I didn't want to ask anybody for help because in a way it's embarrassing. You feel like you're always late to the game. Everybody else understands it. You're like, well, shit, I'm the dumb guy in the corner that doesn't get it, right? And Dylan, I know you're shaking your head. Tell me, what are some of the challenges that you've found with this?
Yeah, I mean, man, back in school there was a lot there. I mean, like you were saying, you could sit there and just look around and everybody seemed to understand and seemed to get it. And there was multiple times where I think back to school and it was all the science classes, the English. The only time English was good was being creative and writing, an essay or like telling a story or something like that. That was the only time I could be creative. But the math, like when I was in school with math, it was a struggle until I got to geometry, when I could visually see shapes. And I'm like, well, of course, that's like the square footage of a room or like, that sort of thing. So it made sense. And it's looking back, it's interesting to see the classes that I excelled in and then the ones that I didn't. And, and back in high school, taking architecture and drafting, like that was fun and exciting. And I paid attention and I could go into that class. I had that class for 3 hours or 3 class periods. And I could go into that class, pay attention the entire time. Then the next class was science and I was gone. I would just, I wasn't even there. And so multiple times throughout my childhood, I just remember thinking like, wow, I'm the dumb kid in class. Like that. I've always struggled with reading, especially reading out loud. It gave me anxiety. Like there was just a lot of stuff there growing up, and I would have to go out the hallway. They'd pull me out of class and I'd go read with a tutor in the hallway to bump my reading level up. And there was also a lot going on at home during that time in my elementary years, but and even into high school and stuff. But it was just, there was just a lot of times where it's like, man, this is really a difficult thing. Like, but now knowing at 30, like, okay, well, I wasn't the dumb kid. I wasn't the kid in school that, just didn't get it. There was other ways that I excelled better than other students. There were certain classes where you'd go to art class and it's like the kid that could finish his test and his assignment in school, in class, had no homework, would struggle with art because they couldn't create or be creative and get those creative juices flowing. So looking back, and I guess that's one of the things with coming on this podcast, like I really wanted to iterate to people, like, if you feel that you have ADHD or you do have ADHD, you're not the dumb kid. You're not the kid that isn't going to make it. Like, I feel that creatives and a lot of it, people with ADHD are extremely successful and are the type of people that are going to be the CEOs, are going to be business owners. They're going to be the ones that excel really well in those fields, rather because they can communicate to people. They might not be the smartest person in the room, but they're the person that everybody looks to for the answer. And I just, that's one of the things coming on here. I really wanted to get across was there's a lot of opportunity for people with ADHD.
And really, there's no different. I mean, ADHD has no implications when it comes to IQ.
Right.
People with ADHD can have high IQs, they can have low IQs, and so it's it doesn't. There's no push onto that. and multiple intelligences that people can have. I mean, I found often, like you were talking about, there were times where I'm sitting there in the class and somebody's, getting that thing that I couldn't get, but I could sit back and like, oh, there's a weird vibe in this class. That person doesn't like this person. The teacher doesn't like that kid, and I could see through things quicker. And, but yet that math problem, it made no sense to me at the time.
Right.
So we go again. Now that you guys have talked, kind of what it is and how it affects you, what causes it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that they know. There's a lot of research out there to understand what it is and what it isn't. There is some indication that it can be genetic. There's nothing definitive out there that says, okay, this is what it is. Far too many people go throughout life and never get diagnosed with it. And I say far too many because I think that it is important to get some sort of diagnosis. I think that was one of the most freeing times of my life when I went to the psychologist and we sat down and we just had a conversation, and she looked at, I took the test before going in. They do this online basic test that you go through. And then we sat down, had a conversation, and she looked at me and she smiled. She says, well, you definitely have ADHD at a very high level, and here's why, and explained it to me. And man, I walked out of that office like beaming because I knew what it was. Now I have an answer. Now I don't have to walk around. And it was almost like when the diagnosis happened, I was free to just accept who I was, because up to that point, there was always this thing in the back of my head that said, you're different, there's something different, but I had no idea what it was. I just thought I was kind of a weird dude that I thought different, I felt different, I was creative different, I saw things different. But then once I realized, oh, this is how your brain is wired, it was like immediate acceptance of, this is badass. Now I can figure it out. Now I've got a tool. And on those days, like Dylan was just talking about with his day off, where, I'm bouncing all over the place and I don't get anything done and I have a hard time making a decision, I can look back at the end of the day and say, the hell with it. It just it wasn't a great day, but that's okay. That's just the way my brain was today. And it'll come back around. So yeah, I'm not sure what causes it or where it comes from per se, but they do know that the brain is literally wired different than those that have what they call a neurotypical brain. And so Dylan, tell me, getting diagnosed later in life, in your early 30s, how did that feel to you once you got that diagnosis? Was this something that it felt frustrating, it felt overwhelming? I know before you said, yeah, it kind of made sense, but what was the overall emotion or feeling to it?
A lot like you, like it was definitely kind of a freeing experience, and like going through that process of just like, okay, someone who's a professional has diagnosed me with this and understands that, or helped me to understand that there's nothing wrong with me. Like there's nothing, like I'm on my own emotional and mental journey within this last year, and truly just understanding like, this is just who I am and the way my brain operates. It was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, because I'm now able to be like, okay, well, now I understand this, or I'm trying to understand it more. What is going to benefit me? How can I hack this? How can I progress? How can I be more efficient and progress quicker in life? Because as you said, the indecisiveness, like I thought about being a barber right out of high school. Like it was there. I was going to do it and I didn't. And then I waited 7 years until after high school to then go into it. And I've been into it for, 6 years now. And that making that decision I'm grateful and extremely happy I did, but it's like that I could look at it and be like, okay, well, that sent me back 7 years. But I also can look at it like, well, I was given the opportunity to explore and try different things to make sure that's what I really wanted to go into. So but in the same breath, I'm like, man, I really could have been a barber for, however many, 14 years now, and really, progressed further in my barbering career. But it is what it is. But there are times that those decisions that need to be made. I mean, even something as simple as what do I want to eat tonight? If I don't have a set meal plan that I'm eating this tonight, I'll drive an hour from Sandy to Payson. And if I'm like, oh, I'm just going to grab a burger. Well, what burger place? There's 50 burger shops along the way, and I can't make that decision. And I pull in my driveway and I was like, well, I'll just make I don't know, egg sandwich or something. Like there's just times that it really just shuts me down. But yeah, I just like, I'm just derailing a little bit, but yes, it was the weight was lifted once I figured out that I do have ADHD. So
what do medications do? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to touch on Dylan's comment first, and then we'll talk about that. So I think that, for me, one of the things that made it most freeing, Dylan, it was that when you get diagnosed with ADHD and you have ADHD, in a way that just becomes like a trait, right? Like I've got curly hair. Some people have brown eyes. Other people have blue eyes, whatever it is. There are traits that we have that we just look at and we accept. It doesn't, you could like it or you could not like it, but you have to accept the fact that you have whatever it is that you have. And that was one of the most empowering things for me, was as soon as I was like guaranteed diagnosed with ADHD, it was just like my curly hair or the color of my eyes or whatever else. I just accepted it and said, okay, now I know. And so how do I manage this? How do I move forward from here? So to answer your question, Miles, here's the really fascinating thing, and I am not an expert in this, right? So anybody listening to this, any of our listeners, I'm not giving advice, and this is not a extremely scientific process. This is just a barber and his client and his buddy talking. So most of the ADHD medications that are out there are stimulants. And so you would think to yourself, okay, well, wait a minute. Why would you be on these stimulants if you have this attention hyperactivity, right? So if your brain is going all over the place, but it comes back to dopamine and dopamine receptors. Most of the brain's ability to function and focus is derailed because of either lower number of dopamine receptors or just a lower amount of dopamine in the brain. So I've read varying perspectives on this, and I'm not sure that I've seen a consensus on it. But what happens is with these stimulants, this is one of the reasons why people with ADHD tend to go after caffeine and sugar quite a bit, is because that helps to get that increase in dopamine going. But these stimulants help people with neurodivergent brains to focus more. Now, again, this is what I've heard. This is what I've read. This is, anecdotal and talking to professionals, but I've never taken any type of ADHD type of medication. But it does help to calm them, helps to focus them, from what I understand. Now, I, like Dylan, have decided that I've made it 46 years in my life. Up to this point, I would consider myself a fairly functional human being. I'm relatively healthy. I have healthy relationships in my life and my family. And so I enjoy the strategies that I've come up with on my own. In fact, when I went to talk to my counselor about it, and she said, yes, you have it. She goes, what do you want to do? I said, what do you recommend? She said, you're doing like everything we tell people to do. The only other thing is, if you want medication, you can take it. It might help a little bit, but you've literally built up habits over the past, however many years of your life to manage this. And So that's kind of where I want to go next, is talking about how we manage these things. So Dylan, I know that you've really gone deep into this topic. You've chosen not to go the medication route because you wanted to focus on habits in your life. What are some of the habits that you've developed that have helped you to manage the ADHD?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the habits that I've learned have been from, honestly, Instagram, because I don't know if it's just the millennial in me, I guess. I don't know, but the social media is the way to intake information, apparently, for me. So one habit or hack is a list. I always have a list. I have a list of everything I need to do. I talking with my counselor. She's like, just have a brain dump. Just get everything out of your brain onto paper, handwrite it out. It's more stimulating that way. And
yeah, it's very cathartic. It gets it out of your mind.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so that's super helpful. And then I go through that list and I organize what's priority. I don't know if you guys can really read the white or clear board behind me, but it's a list of things I needed to get done before our trip to Hawaii this weekend. And so it's funny because Christina, she's also now learning about ADHD, how she handles it. And one of the things is having your partner or someone there to watch you do the thing or to help you with your list. And so we both came in here. She wrote down on the whiteboard what I need to get done, not what she needs to get done. She was just helping me to focus in on what I need to get done. And so having a giant board, and Dylan is the blue Sharpie, and Christina's the red one, and we have our list, do our thing. And so it's very helpful to have that. Exercise routine, having the same process every single morning. You get up, do your thing, whatever that is. If it's meditation or immediately into the gym or putting your favorite socks on, whatever it is, like you just do that routine. That helps you guide your way into your day. Oh man, now I'm blanking on my other stuff, but mostly it is the list. It's the routine, the habits that you create that are going to be beneficial. For the longest time for me, I definitely would I'd have a day where the monkey brain would be in full effect, and I just would then be done at the end of the day and wow, I accomplished nothing. And I would then beat myself up and I would tear myself down, which is not beneficial at all. And that's one thing that I've really tried to focus on more than, anything else, is just giving myself that grace and giving myself that opportunity to be like, it's okay. You got through your day, you did your thing, but tomorrow's a new day. Your brain could be clicking, could be firing on all cylinders, and you can get through it.
Yeah, those are great tips. I love what you're talking about, the list. I mean, I keep journals and I type a lot on my iPad with the things that I need to do. The other thing that I've done to manage is I have an organizational system for almost everything, because one of the things that happens with an ADHD brain is you forget. If you set your phone down and you don't do it in the same place every single time, you're going to forget, you're going to lose things. And I learned early on, if I could create a system for even, I'm looking in my office and my closet over here, how my clothes are hanging. I've got them organized by, length of the shirt sleeve and then color. And it makes life so much easier. In fact, there's a quote that I love that Barack Obama said, that when he became president of the United States, he only would wear two colors of suits. He'd wear a blue or a gray. And that was it, because he had to reduce the number of decisions that he was making during the day. And that resonated with me because I if I have too many decisions to make, I'm going to be going in a million different directions. So my routines and the systems that I have in my life, I set once and I decide, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then I may come back to it later on and adjust it or adapt it, but I do the same thing. Dylan talked about his routine of getting up in the morning. I've got the same routine. I mean, it is clockwork. I get up, I come upstairs, I grab the book, I sit down. Like, it's the same thing every single day. It's probably, if somebody watched my life, it would be watching that old Jim Carrey movie, The Truman Show. I say the same things to myself every day on the way to the gym. I walk in the same, I go sit in the sauna for 5 minutes and then I'm out. Like, it is repetitive. I've had people in the past joke and make fun of me because of my routines and say, well, you're obsessive compulsive. And I said, well, I've actually thought about that. And I got, I got tested for that. It's not that. It's the fact that with ADHD, if I don't have my routines, I forget far too many things, and it just kind of makes me very confused. So having a system for everything makes a big difference. One of the things that I've found, especially in this last year, is that my mental health does so much better when I am lean and fit. And, workout and exercise is important, but I found that as I got my body fat lower, my brain functioned so much better. In fact, I would say in the last 6 to 9 months, I've had so much more mental clarity as I've really dialed in and figured out my nutrition and my strength training even more. But it makes a massive, massive difference. And then, I want to come back to Dylan, to what you said earlier. As I mentioned before, I've been studying a lot more Buddhist and Taoist traditions lately because, in Buddhism, the idea of this ultimate level of compassion for self and compassion for others is there. And that's really something that I've had to struggle with over the years. Like you, Dylan, if I had a bad day where I wasn't focused or I didn't get stuff done, man, I would beat myself up over it. I would feel so bad. And now, at 46 years old, I'm pausing and saying, wait a minute, that's just the way that you're wired. You can't get mad at your curly hair. You can't get mad at the color of your eyes. Don't get mad at the way your brain is. Have some self-compassion, because if you want to accomplish something, you will. It might just take another day to get there. So I think there's a lot of great techniques out there that people can employ. But a lot of it is that trial and error process, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say one more that I thought of as we were, as you were talking, time limits. I have this little
big time
cube thing that sets it for
awesome.
60 minutes, 5 minutes, 15. And my intention is to come into the office, set that up, and I'm here for 30 minutes. I'm going to go run through all my emails, clear the computer for 30 minutes, and then I'm off doing something else. And then on my phone, it's the same. I have a 5-minute social media timer. So that goes off. It's my first thing in the morning. And then I really, really try to not bypass it. There's times that I have to. I mean, Steve, you and I have messaged through Instagram just for haircut appointments and things like that. And so I have to jump on there and but I really try and focus to not be on social media, even though there are times that there's really good things and the ADHD, there's good hacks, but a lot of times I'm looking at cars. Let's be honest, I'm getting that dopamine hit. I'm looking at whatever's going on in the world of cars. So
another beautiful truck.
Right. You're right. Yeah. So a timer is a huge, huge benefit for me. So
yeah, that's a big one for me as well. And I don't know if you feel like this, but one thing I've noticed lately is that the way I dress directly influences how I show up in life. And I've always believed that, right? Dressing a certain way, you're going to show up different. And so I used to wear suits all the time with a previous job. I don't anymore, but I still have to have a sense of refinement in what I do or what I wear. On days where I just throw on sweats or a hoodie and I'm just kind of hanging out, even if I'm going out to do something, I'm not focused, because it's almost like I look down and I think, oh, hey, it's relax time, right? So
Right.
I've noticed how much for me in particular that when I've got to get something done, I need to dress in a way that I can then show up to get that thing done. So
Yep.
it's I don't know, it's a weird little hack that I found.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big one for me too. I think a lot of the times for me, it was more out of fear growing up in a smaller town in Payson, going to Walmart or any store and bumping into a friend from high school. I've been out of high school for 12 years now, but at worst, a ex-girlfriend from high school, and I look unkempt, like I have a
Yeah,
hoodie and
right.
sweats on. That for me was a big factor. But anymore, like if I have a morning where, I'm choosing to put sweatpants on after my morning shower versus pants, you know to get outside and get doing something, I will stay inside for the majority of the morning because
Yep.
I've chosen to put those comfortable clothes on,
Mm.
so
Yeah, it's interesting what the physical environment, and everybody's a little bit different. So my daughter and I were talking about this recently. I love wide open, super clean spaces. I don't want to see a lot of things. Minimal is better for me, because that opens my mind up to being creative. It also doesn't clutter my thoughts. She does better with a more maximalist. She wants to be able to see everything, and she can boot, doot, 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 and then that helps her to focus if she can see all of that right there in front of her.
yeah.
And so again, the ADHD is really a tale of these dichotomistic, diametrically opposed characteristics.
Yeah.
Well, Dylan, we are coming up on our time here. I want to, thank you for coming on and opening
Really
up
interesting.
and yeah, talking to us. I know we've talked about a lot of great things tonight, and we've talked about some great habits and told a little bit of your story. If there's one important habit that you want our listeners to build off of, or if there's one bit of advice, and it doesn't have to be about ADHD, because I mean, let's face it, you're the barber, right? So everybody talks to the barber. That's
Right.
why you're a barber, not just because you're great at cutting hair. You're a great listener. You got wisdom. So
Right.
what's that one barberly advice you would give to our listeners?
Oh man. I would, if I would say creating the habits, ADHD or not, creating those habits of your morning routine, your workout, whatever it is, whatever you're trying to accomplish in your life, go for it. But understand there needs to be a structure behind it, and understand that when you create that structure, good things will come. And I feel like that has been beneficial in my life. I've been able to create successes with building that structure, understanding like doing these routine things help me to progress, help me to be creative and to create the joys of life.
That's awesome. And I can see that just in knowing you and seeing what you create. I mean, you buy and build and fix cool cars and trucks. I mean, the helmet thing, like we talked about at the beginning of this, the stuff that you build, like it's
Yeah.
mind blowing to me with all the creative projects that you put together. Obviously, you're great at what you do. You make a guy like me look better every time I come in and see you. So thanks again for coming on the episode. So on that note, folks, it is time for us to wrap up another episode of the Evolve podcast. I want to thank our guest, Dylan Clark, for joining us, and my co-host, W. Miles Riley. Dylan, I know that you're a hard man to get into,
Right.
but if somebody sees me on the street and they see how good looking I am because of my haircut, and they want to come and see you, what's the
Yeah.
best way for them to contact you?
Best way is to go, probably you could either Google the shop, Wild Boar Barbers in Sandy, or jump on my Instagram is revelry_barber. You can book through there. Message me. I try, like I said earlier, I try to stay off social media, but I also have to glance at it every now and then. So I might might take me a day or two, but I will get back to you. And yeah, right now it's busy times. It's getting into the holidays. So I'm pretty much a month and a half out right now. So it's great for me, great, for business, but it's really hard to get into the shop. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it's at least 2 to 3 weeks, and sometimes a month and a half. So if anybody wants to get in to see you, they got to book now.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thanks, Dylan. And hey, folks, remember that it does take time and consistency to evolve, but first you have to disrupt. And now it's time for you to get out there and evolve.
And evolve.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve Podcast. If you like this episode, share it with your friends. Follow us on Instagram at evolve_cast and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcasting app. And now it's time for you to get out there and evolve.